You probably have already gathered why I'm on radio and TV, because I never shut up. So you'll have to bear with me tonight. We're going to cover a lot of territory, but I'll give you a little background. I was born in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, into the 87th Division Airborne. My dad, World War II, Korea, and then after being addicted to combat, he was a stateside and overseas drill instructor, including in our house. I had my brother, sister, and myself, downline troopers from me. We had a duty roster in our kitchen, and everything on the quarter hour, Bobby, Johnny, Charlie. And God forbid you should miss an assignment because he wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning to remind you about that assignment, like the day that I had to stand out when we came back to Fort Bragg when I was a kid and water the grass in my skivvies until the sun came up and everybody laughed at me as they were going to work. That's how I was raised. My dad was also an NYPD Special Investigations Unit officer after that, again, addicted to combat. So, most of my stateside time as a kid, because I spent time in Germany and Japan, was spent back in New York and New Jersey. In fact, I was talking to someone here from Chicago. We speak the same language in some sense. What I mean to say by that is, the good news about Minnesotans is that you're nice. The bad news about Minnesotans is that you're nice. And you'll take it and take it and take it. I've written a couple of pieces. Actually, hello. I've written a couple of pieces about Minnesota's gag reflex. I keep asking the question over and over again and not getting much of an answer from people. How many body bags and hospital beds to be filled will it take before Minnesotans finally get the message that this is about survival and stand up and do something about this? How many people heard about I want to digress for a moment, the Valley Fair incident, Valley Scare. It was barely in the news, as you probably are aware. My grandkids were caught up in that, in the middle of it. 6 police departments were called, police helicopter, state troopers, first responders. They cleared out 15,000 people in the course of about an hour and a half because 100 of these lovely cherubs hopped the fence and busted through the turnstiles and broke out in a staged, and I mean staged, brawling all over the park. Last year, they did the same thing on a smaller scale, got away with it, and as a result, they came back again. I spoke to a police captain in Shakopee because I was interviewing him for a piece that I was writing on the subject, because no news actually gets reported in Minnesota, if you notice. I used to host a weekly radio program, I'll get back to the story, for 8 years with KDWA Radio out of Hastings. It was entitled Common Sense Over the Back Fence. And I used to end the show every week in the same way. I reserve the right to be wrong, and I pray to God that I'm right. And I also had a cable TV program entitled You've Got to Be Kidding. And all of this went on for about 10 years, ended about 2008. But I've been drafted back into service at the ripe old age of 70 this month, about 4 months ago. The reason is I have children and grandchildren at stake here. I've been here 47 years. I've never seen a place change so rapidly in the wrong direction as it has in the last 10 or 15 years in Minnesota. These people are getting away with murder, and they know it. My nemesis, where is he? He's such a wonderful man, too. I'll explain about last week's encounter with this man. Is Jailani Hussein, the Minnesota Council on American Islamic Relations director. He sees me, and he calls the cops, and all I have to do is smile. I film, I record, I witness, and I report about this man's antics and care. They are engaged in a interfaith dialogue. Oh, by the way, when I said my name is Bob, just like in an AA meeting, you're supposed to say, "Hi, Bob."
Hi, Bob.
That feels so much better. Thank you. Interfaith dialogue. Now that's interesting. Let me tell you about last week's interfaith dialogue, and then we'll get into some of the stuff. I attended to, with my camera get-up, my rig back there, and recorder, a presentation, another presentation by Mr. Hussein. And it was all about let's hug each other with the St. John the Evangelist Episcopal Church in St. Paul. That was last Wednesday. And I knew my big mistake was registering in my own name through Eventbrite. I won't do that again. In fact, I'm scheduled to be in St. Cloud State University tomorrow night, and I asked somebody to register in my first and middle name. But the police authorities have been alerted. Reason, last week, when I drove by, I saw a St. Paul PD cruiser, SUV, there, and a officer standing on the street outside the church. So I knew something was up. But anyway, I went in with my equipment. I was dressed okay, better than I am tonight, and went right past him and didn't even give me a nod. Went to the registration table, and they gave me this name tag. You know, I usually put down your name instead of my own name, just to be funny. So I put down Bob, and then they said, well, we need your last name. As soon as they put down my last name, I was swarmed upon by a gentleman claiming to be security, and he was hired security, about 6'3", and then he motioned for the officer to come in, and he told me I had to leave. And I started to laugh because that's what I do. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, don't make it any worse than it is. You're under investigation already. I went, no kidding. I said, and these people are starting to giggle a little bit, and because I can be funny on occasion. My grandkids think I'm a stitch, my children not so much anymore. But, so I looked at him and I said, under investigation by whom and for what? And I'm still laughing. He said, you're going to have to go outside. I said, who are you? I asked the guy. He said, I'm security for the church. I said, okay, and your name is? I don't have to tell you. I said, yeah, you kind of do. So I'm still laughing, and I still haven't moved. My camera equipment is all laying on a bench. I said, let me see if I understand this. I'm under investigation. You can't tell me what it is. You can't tell me who's investigating me, or for what, or what agency is investigating me. I have since found out that no such investigations going on, so, yeah. But, and yes, today, hot off the presses, the police report. I had to go retrieve that on my way down here today. Reason is, it ain't over. Good. I talked to the pastor this past Monday. He was out of town last Wednesday, and not a bad guy, right up until the time I told him who I was. And then he kind of got a little nervous and started to get a little testy with me. And I said, look, I consulted my own pastor. I said I was born and raised in the Roman Catholic Church, but you know, I'm a failed Catholic, so I became a Missouri Synod Lutheran. But I did talk to my pastor this past Sunday, and I asked for his advice. He said to me, when I told him I was thinking about coming to your church without announcing who I was initially, he said, no, don't do that. Call him, be a nice guy. Invite him out to coffee. So I did that. Oh, by the way, where's Anthony? Oh, there you go. I meant to mention earlier, in where I'm from, we don't call Anthony Anthony, we call him Anthony, Jersey style, just like, that was my stupid joke. So anyway, so I talked to the pastor and I said to him, gee, you know, that was an interesting event. I've never been humiliated like that. I've never been booted out and told that I was under investigation. He said to me, well, you're going to have to solve your legal problems and then you can come back and we can have a cup of coffee. I said, I don't have any legal problems. I have a problem with the speaker. Well, you're going to have to take it up with the speaker. I said, well, that's part of the problem. The speaker doesn't speak to me. I said, the last time the speaker spoke to me, or at me, it was at the Minnesota History Center in St. Paul, Minnesota Historical Society. And I attended another one of his, oh, in fact, where is it? It was a wonderful presentation. Oh, here it is. Islam 101. Well, I'm kind of an older guy. I think I've got an IQ of 140. I sat there and I'm thinking, I drive him crazy. So I'm sitting here just smiling at him with my recording device. And I said, somebody piped up and asked him a question. Oh, we'll save questions for the Q&A session afterwards, which never came. When he saw me, I make him very nervous. And you get him off speech, off his game, and it's a game, he falls apart like a cheap suit. And so at the end, I knew he wasn't going to call on me, so I stood up and I leaned against the wall. And I had, where's the article? It's a great article. Oh, it's about Valley Fair. I'll find it in a second. Oh, here it is. So I'm holding this up. I'm also holding this up. Let me introduce you to 26-year-old Special Forces Staff Sergeant Alexander Conrad, based out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, with the other 500 troopers who are currently serving in Somalia, along with the other NATO forces, fighting the same morons who are living amongst us as we speak, who are, by the way, because of these two people, whoops, and that's Tom Emmer, someone I've known for, let's see, 2005, when I was serving my penance at the Capitol for 10 years on statewide task forces, overlapping task forces, serving with DHS in the Minnesota Supreme Court. I have the scar. If I turned around, you could see the lashes on my back. I have the scar tissue to prove I was there. Also served on the Commissioner's Advisory Committee to DHS for 6 miserable years. I learned how to speak DHS, though. It was fun. These people produced this problem. How many people have heard about the suitcases full of cash caught at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport? Up to $1 million. And the claim is by Jailani Hussein and the usual suspects is that all this money is coming from the mom and pop grocery store, whatever the business happens to be. I thought these people were poor on welfare. Apparently not. Not satisfied with that theft, and we'll get back to Sergeant Conrad in a minute. By the way, I took my kids, my daughter and son-in-law, and my grandchildren an hour and a half to get out of the parking lot at Valley Fair. WCCO, that's the other problem we all have here. We have no media. Channel 11, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why I've been drafted back into service. WCCO took Valley Scare, they called it a minor incident. I don't think so, Scooter, as Ron Way would say. So we have the remittances program, and then we have this one. There's remittances, and that's the Hawala business, money transfer services. And Tom Lydon, who knows me from Channel 9 for years, did a hit piece on me because he did a program on the 17th of, I'm dropping him on the floor to get him out of the way, on the 17th of October, he did a story about all of this, just pacifying everyone. A lifeline back home. Now, doesn't that sound wonderful? A lifeline back, it's just $200 to $300 being sent back home through the money transfer services as they stroll down the marketplace in Minneapolis, hand in hand, Jailani Hussein and Tom Lydon. And it's all about $200-300 being sent home to mom and pop and the 18 siblings and the 95-year-old grandma. That's how it was presented. The problem was that they used me as well as a partial clip relative to our Third Rail Talk podcast, just about the time I was going to introduce to them, as I was introducing to the viewer, this gentleman, killed by the money that has been stolen from Minnesota taxpayers, hundreds of millions of dollars. If you add all the social services systems up together, it's probably around $700 million a year. Wire transfers being exposed by this guy, who I've made contact with recently, who just happens to live about 4 miles from me, where I live in St. Michael. So we're going to get together for coffee, because he's beginning to trust me. His name is Scott Stillman, being interviewed by the same station, Channel 9, television, Fox News, Jeff Valiant. He's the whistleblower who has taken his life in his own hands to tell all of you and me the truth. Daycare billing fraud, $100 million. He indicated in testimony in front of Senator Jim Abler's committee, Medicaid fraud is probably 2 or 3 times that. Then you have food stamp fraud, subsidized transportation fraud, the, what's the other one? I'm trying to think of some of the others. Subsidized meals fraud, the charter school fraud. You add it all up, it's $700 million, $600 million a year, and they haven't stopped it yet. It's still going on. The reason, according to people I know at the Capitol, is because DHS is headed up by commissioner, the commissioner, who used to be Governor Dayton's attorney. The Inspector General, Carolyn Ham, who can't find her butt with both hands because she doesn't want to, they don't care. They don't care because this is an exchange, your productivity for their votes and their job. Flat out. I used to, when I was on radio way back in the day, I used to call them tax junkies. On both sides of the trough, the ones feeding the system and the ones taking from the system. We have the largest population of Somalis in the entire country by an extreme margin for a reason: welfare. Cradle to grave, and apparently no questions asked. And if somebody comes forward, because he worked for DHS for 8 years, he's a forensic investigator, was with Washington County Sheriff's Department doing the same thing, 24-year veteran law enforcement officer, and now he's afraid for his life. Flat out. That's the truth. And he gets thrown under the bus, and then run over a couple more times, by Tom Lydon with this stupid story about how it's really not the fraud. It's all about the, I'm losing my stuff here. It's all about, according to him, a lifeline back home. $200-300, mom, pop, the 18 siblings, and the 95-year-old grandma. Not so much. Should also tell you that Channel 9 is in deep trouble. Reason: we are third rail talk. We are not third rail politics. So we were intentionally mislabeled. And this clip, just a still photo of that, was misused. We're also labeled as a right-wing extremist group. Because this isn't about just Islamophobia. This is about fighting the Islamophobia industry. I'm part of that industry now. That's why they booted me out of the church last Wednesday, because I'm part of this conspiratorial industry. Jailani Hussein and CARE And a group called Isaiah, God forgive them for naming it that, put this out. This is what they do in communist countries and in the Middle East to mark you for dead. This person right here is Jeff Johnson running for governor. This person right here is A.J. Kern, who ran against Tom Emmer for the congressional seat. All of these people, I know. This is John Gilmore, writes for The Hill and Alpha News, and he wrote a blistering response. All of these people are well-known attorneys and people in Minnesota. The report is incredible. With all the crime and violence going on around us, this is an invitation to people like Antifa, go get them. Mm-hmm. Like crazy Maxine Waters or Nancy Pelosi. Go get them in the restaurants. Go get them anywhere you find them. Assault them. Insult them. It's dangerous. People are getting hurt. This is a way to mark people for an attack and assault. And I have to tell you, this is very, very serious stuff. So, we are not third-rail politics. We're not a right-wing conspiratorial group. We're not part of any industry. We're just telling the truth. This man, if Keith Ellison, one of my favorite pictures of Keith. Yeah. Let's see. Just love this, you know. Fidel Castro, if he were still alive, he'd just very funny. Lenin called people like, no, some of the people with Isaiah, as an example, useful idiots. They are. Anybody that votes for this guy is voting for the destruction of this state in a heartbeat. Reason? Because Bicycle Betsy Hodges, the former mayor, yes, I am sarcastic, you'll have to forgive me in advance, former mayor of Minneapolis, right after the 30, find that, oh, yeah, here we go. 2 years ago, this is where Tom Lydon and I butted heads 2 years ago also. 2 years ago, 30 Somali men, 3 days in a row, went to Lake Calhoun in Minneapolis and attacked women on the beaches, chased them off the beaches with their SUVs and on foot, and they threatened to kidnap and rape them. This, and Mr. Hussein said, that's not true. I have the police report. This is it. Terroristic threats. 3 days in a row. Anybody venture a guess as to what the punishment was? Nothing. Not even a parking ticket. 3 days they did this. So, because Bicycle Betsy has to pander to the vote, she got dressed up in a burqa, along with the police chief, then Janae Harto, and they announced, we must take care of you. We have to reach out to you. We have to find out what we did wrong to cause you to do this. And then you had the bunch of boys, who aren't boys, by the way. Remember, Billy the Kid was 16 when he shot his first man. I think it was a man. Anyway, they demanded money. The elders from the community in this listening session conducted by Mayor Hodges and the police chief, dressed in the Middle Eastern garb, said, what can we do to help you persuade these guys from attacking people, threatening to rape and kidnap them? Now, if that happened to me, because I used to live in that area of town, Diamond Lake area of Minneapolis, on the second day I'll be sitting on my porch boiling my shotgun. Flat out. Reason, I'm nice. I'm just not that nice. And I'm not that stupid. So they then initiate because we have to help them. If anybody complains about that, then you get reported to the brown shirts, the police, the authorities, who will then investigate you for having the nerve to say, I don't like that. And this is real. This is called part of the Mayor's Compact. 12 cities in Minnesota have signed up for this nonsense, where they get to prosecute and charge any of you, and me. I'm going to prison. The reason is I'm a target, and I know that after last Wednesday, if I didn't know that before. It's not a lifeline back home, it's theft of money. And I've been at this, somebody asked me, I think it was you, how long have I been doing this? Well, I've been involved with the Keith Ellison thing for a long time. I was responsible for getting released recently the story on the national scene because of the recent allegation of domestic violence. Karen Monahan, who's got to be the biggest moron on the planet, for a variety of reasons, please pardon me for being so bold, she chose to be with Keith in the first place. And Karen was preceded by Amy Alexander, 2006, actually earlier than that. She was an intern with Keith Ellison's campaign back in the early 2000s. Amy Alexander was abused in the very same way. This is an article entitled Coming Out of the Dark, October 11, 2006. I was responsible back then for doing the investigative work that caused this article to be written. Nobody in Minneapolis would touch it. No news outlet. Care TV, they were busy analyzing the latest hot dish recipe. WCCO went, I don't see anything. Esme Murphy's still going, I don't see anything. But Amy Alexander was so abused. 911 calls. I didn't believe the story when I first saw it, when I heard about it. But I investigated. 911 calls, verified parking ticket violations in front of her house by Keith Ellison that he never paid. She was so afraid of him, she left the country. She's never come back. She lives in the United Kingdom. She's the first victim. And I was personally responsible, along with Third Rail Talk, of getting that story out. And our method these days is to shoot it out, whether it's Valley Fair, or whether it's the Minnesota's anti-Muslim propaganda mill, or the death of Sergeant Conrad and why, and who killed him. We shoot it out to the national networks that we have access to. Our theory, which seems to be proving correct, is then it eventually gets bounced back to Minnesota, forcing the Minnesota media to finally go, okay, we'll do the story. Another one, Ilhan Omar. What a sweetheart. One of my favorite pictures that nobody's seen is a mugshot of Ilhan when she got arrested at the Minneapolis Convention Center back in 2000 and I think 13. Ilhan Omar, and I've been working with PJ Media out of New York City and David Steinberg for the past 4 months. He's done 3 articles so far. The 4th one's coming out in the next couple of days. They've done their own investigative work relative to Ilhan, who, by the way, has the same lawyer as Keith Ellison. Same attorney. She got a divorce this past December, and I don't know about how things shake up in your neighborhood in terms of marriage and divorce, but she got this divorce.
Which husband?
Yeah, good question. I like you already. 2017, December, she gets a divorce from the first guy, who turns out to be, and this has been proved by David Steinberg and PJ Media now, because they have the Department of Education records now to prove it. It's her brother. You can't make this stuff up, but it's okay because she's cute. She's not so cute. That's not cute. She's slick though. And I'm wearing something that she talks about all the time these days. Lots of people do. It's a dog whistle. She hears dog whistle messages. I filmed her at St. Cloud State University about 3 weeks ago. As soon as she saw me as she came through the door, because I saw her recently at the annual DFL picnic. They were giving free food out, and they said, oh, still only got 60 people there. governor was there, Ellison was there, although he ran away for a while, left his girlfriend on the pavement as he scooted down the road in his car to run away from the cameras and the people chasing him to ask him questions about the allegations against Karen Monahan and Amy Alexander. The kid idiot from the new mayor of St. Paul, unbelievable. And with every election, I don't know whether anybody's noticing, they're getting worse. Yep. I remember the day, some of these people connected with the DFL in Minnesota actually still think Hubert Humphrey's alive. They do. Or Paul Wellstone. I saw somebody with a Wellstone t-shirt at the picnic who was upset because of all of the, I'll find it in a second, all of the protesters who were protesting all the stuff that was going on with Amy Alexander and the domestic violence and all that stuff. And he was so beset upon that he ran away. Then he came back an hour later. And then you had the Secretary of State, Steve Simon, my former nemesis, the former Secretary of State, Mark Ritchie, who knows me personally because I blew the whistle and we reported on it nationally about the voter fraud in Minnesota. Being funded by George Soros. Mark Ritchie was endorsed by Soros and paid for, bought and paid for. It was the Secretary of State project, SOS project. Our Attorney General, Lori Swanson, also got caught with her hand in the till and caught writing checks out of the Minnesota Attorney General checkbook to Acorn. $249,999, and we caught her red-handed and exposed it, and that stopped it in its tracks. This state's amazing to me. You're from Chicago. I'm from New York and New Jersey in the military. I've never seen such corruption in my whole life as in Minnesota. And they get away with it. Yes, sir.
Well, just a question when you talked about this, kind of goes back on the beach and everything else. Any of those people, any of those women that chase off, did any of them stand up and said, you know what, it's not going to go away because I'm filing charges? It's terroristic to me, the FBI should have been involved in because
of course,
it was terrorist, but my point is,
all right.
Did those women follow through or did they just let it go? Because to me...
They didn't let it go, but who are you going to go to? You have to have people in authority that are actually willing to take the complaint. They went to Channel 5.
Well, I don't have to go to the news. My question is you would go to your county attorney.
Good luck.
Well, but my point is if you do the police report, and you go to your county attorney, and you meet with your county attorney, and again, you do your legwork and said, okay, the county attorney said, well, we're not going to touch it. Then you got to ask the county attorney when he comes up for election, again, why isn't he touching it?
Good luck.
Well, but I'm just saying...
I'm not trying to be a wise guy, and you got a great question.
And to go through that, to pound on the desk and say it's not going to go away, and say it is. The next thing the question is that if I want to give some money to mom and dad and send or everything else, inheritance taxes or anything else, you're allowed to get so much money. What I don't understand in the state of what's going is why they don't have to monitor just how much money they send out of the country. I see it at Hy-Vee here in town all the time. I see them in line. I see money orders. I see all this money going out. The question is why aren't we monitoring this money to say that Mohammed has sent X amount of wires out of the country and amount to X amount of money, and we're tracking that.
The reason we have remittances promoted by Tom Emmer, Amy Klobuchar, Keith Ellison. Remittances is just a code word for the money transfer systems and services taking supposedly money they've earned and sending it back home. It has nothing to do with the money that's been stolen and multiple exotic wire transfer systems.
What the point is that the money that if you're truly, and what you're saying, stealing this money, which I would believe that a lot of people come to this country and they're criminals where they come from. They come here and set up a camp here, whatever. But the point is that would eventually say if I've wired $30,000 home and my job shows me I only make 20, where did I come up with the other 10? And this is what I'm saying is...
You have to find somebody that cares. And if you go to somebody like Mike Freeman, I've known Mike Freeman a long time, the Hennepin County attorney, is as corrupt as they get. You can't, if there's no, and the Hennepin County Sheriff, Rich Stanek, used to be a police captain in Minneapolis, then became a state legislator. Now he's the Hennepin County Sheriff, and all he can talk about is report to the hotline and we'll investigate people. Mike Freeman, good example. Anybody remember the name Justine Damon?
Yes.
40-year-old. Killed, shot dead by a police officer, MPD officer, Mohammed Noor. His plan, Mr. Freeman, was to contain that case inside of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office and not release it to a grand jury until he was pressured by me and other people going, hello, what are you doing? He got caught on camera a couple of times because people were beginning to question him at social events last Christmas, and he finally acquiesced and sent it to a grand jury.
Can a person, could a group strong enough to do that to be able to bring a lawsuit?
Where?
Well, my point is, you filed a lawsuit, they have to, in other words, that does make news, that does make things that I'm filing, if I went to the county attorney and something like that happened, they said we're not gonna do anything else, I guess that what the group needs to do, or if we could sit in a room like this and talk all night long,
Well,
and you can tell them all
Jan, you were in a
ever-
meeting with Nels Pearson. Did you go? Were you in the meeting with Nels Pearson last week? Representative Nels Pearson? No. Because there would have been an opportunity to ask an elected official why he has written 9 bills that provide for special provisos for a community, including the $19 million bill. Nobody in Nell's constituency was begging for a $19 million giveaway program that would have led to more fraud, waste, and abuse through the DHS.
Right.
We're just exposing that here, and I don't mean to grandstand on you,
You're
but we're calling
Somebody else is gonna
Carla
take
But
out
that's
on
not-
her
but that's
bills
not
of
what I'm at.
400. Yeah.
That's not my thing here. My question is that you have to be able to bring a lawsuit against the county attorney.
Who's gonna
Not-
do it?
You go down and file the paperwork, and if you really truly believe in what you do, you file the paperwork and you put your name on a piece of paper.
People tried to file the paperwork relative
Well,
to,
you can't say they tried to. If you put your money down and you file it, it's filed.
No.
It's-
That's what he's telling us, that doesn't happen.
It doesn't carry through, nobody follows through.
Jan, this group has been sitting in meetings with the head of the DHS, including the investigators, sitting right there. Maybe, Bob, you want to talk a little bit about the DHS investigations last summer that we tried to get going on the CCAP program.
well, I don't
There's
wanna get into
$200
the
million
details
a
of
year,
that,
but
what
we
I'm
are
telling you
following
is that
through. Some people are following through.
There has to be someone in authority that you can go to.
Well, maybe this election will change, but I'm just saying is that you truly gotta believe in something, and if you've been wrong, you gotta, I've been there.
I do believe-
And I take it all the way
So-
to get resolved, and a lot of people say it's not worth it, I'm tired, I go whatever, and then they complain about it, but they never follow through with it. And my point is that I have to believe that I come out here, sit in a group like this to do this, and I see a lot of faces that we're all together, and that's what you have to do, is be able to change something and grab onto something and say, it's gotta change.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I
Yep.
tell you, I'm not poo-pooing what you're saying. There's a follow-through guy. 8 years he worked with DHS. He uncovered all of this stuff. 3 years he sent memo after memo, email after email, governor's office, attorney general's office. He sent them to the commissioner's office, the inspector general's office with DHS. Zero response, that's why he went to Channel 9. This is what government is doing. And if you want to object to this, the only experience I can share with you is trying to talk to a tree to stop it. This guy is a result of that. Anybody recognize this? No. He's a Sharia cop in the Cedar Riverside area. Yeah, And he has 9 other of his brethren patrolling the Cedar Riverside area. And they have asked for, from Mayor Fry, another useful idiot and a moron, for a wall to be built around the Cedar Riverside area. I know that area very well. I ride a motorcycle.
How do they allow, how do they allow someone to patrol and do things in the my point is, if they're actually patrolling out there in uniform and everything else, it's real law, how is that not outside the guidelines of the state of Minnesota if someone says, you know what? You can't do this because it's...
But he is doing it. And he represents the general presidency of religious affairs and welfare of the Ummah. And I'm
So
telling
the
you,
neighborhood, but there again, it goes back to the neighborhood. The neighborhood was so nice, but back to the neighborhood, if I had a guy like that in the neighborhood, it wouldn't be happening because I'd say, what the hell is going on here?
well, I should have started my whole presentation by telling you right from the beginning. Jailani Hussein's last word in my direction, as he was walking out of the Minnesota History Center, and he looked down at me because he doesn't like me for showing up, and I smile a lot. He said, have a nice ride back to St. Cloud. That's where he first met me about this time last year. And I just smiled. I knew he was fishing, wanted to find out where I lived. Well, I already do know where I live, and I'll prove it to you in a minute. And so, as he's moving this way, as he's walking out, I said, you know, I've got to give you credit. You're the most amazing con man I've run into in 25 years. And you are smooth. And I told him, I said the same thing to you on film at your Stillwater presentation back in April. He turns around, he said, that's the most racist thing I've ever heard. And everybody was laughing, including me. I said, smooth? I guess it's a dog whistle thing. What we're dealing with is something incredibly dangerous and very slick. And they're getting away with it. And the first, look, according to Mr. Hussein, I'm a racist, a bigot, an Islamophobe, a xenophobe, a hater, anti-immigrant. Look at me. Do you think my last name is Swenson or Johansson? Olson? It's not. It's Carillo. My grandparents came over here, as they used to say, on the boat through Ellis Island. My grandfather was from Puerto Rico. He was so sick they sent him back to start all over again. My grandmother from the Portuguese-Spanish border, and the rest of my family from a country I'm very proud of for avoiding all of this mess, Poland. So, I'm a mutt. Racist? Seriously? But that's the smooth. Smooth is the equivalent, word for, in his brain, he had to throw something at me to disarm me, to marginalize me. So all those racial slurs are supposed to stop me in my tracks. It's not going to happen. One of the reasons is I'm not from around here. And when you talk about you have to go do something, I'm the go do something guy.
I see that.
So,
I see that.
and I respect what you're saying. The problem is, like with the St. Paul PD, I had to visit with them and educate them this week, along with the pastor of a church. And I said to those people as I was being escorted out, let me see if I get this. I said, this is a Christian church, right? Well, yeah, what's your point? You're going to, it says my faith votes, you're going to throw a Christian out because that guy, who is not a Christian, points a finger at me and says he's guilty of something, and he's being investigated for something. That's part of the police report too, by some agency who we haven't identified. Just point, and you're out of here. That's how it works.
They trespassed you, is what they did.
Yeah, but that was a church, private property.
Correct.
So I'll see him in St. Cloud tomorrow night. I won't say a word. He'll notice that I'm not saying anything with my camera, but he can hear me saying, dog whistle. He can hear me saying to him, how you doing? In Jersey. How you doing? The man detests me because he knows I see right through it. The problem is, I had to call the Stearns County Sheriff. I have a friend, Bradley Dean Smith, with Sons of Liberty Radio, who was also there last Wednesday. And they turned him and his wife and his 4 kids away because they know me, because I'm such a dangerous guy with my camera. So tomorrow night, what he's not expecting is the Stearns County Sheriff's Department has been notified by my Wright County Sheriff, who I've met, and who Bradley knows, talk about creating inroads and impact, and the St. Cloud Assistant Chief, who Bradley knows, who knocked on his door and said, I got a story to tell you. And they all called the St. Cloud University security people and said, hey, this is coming. Don't let it happen. And we're probably going to have a plainclothes person there to keep the peace, and that's what I want to do. I don't want an incident.
Can they trespass you there?
No, it's a public building. Look,
But it's a public building, but it's an event. In other words, when Trump comes to town and when he rents the places, he throws people out because Club Brown said, I've rented this place for the event. It was a public building at the Mayo Civic Center, but he rented that event, so therefore he could trespass who he wanted because it would come to thing. So
I can't figure out whether you're with me or against me.
No, I'm
Here's
I'm
the-
with you. I'm
here's
not
the-
trying to explain. I'm just trying to ask you a question. Is if you take your time to go there, my only question is if he's renting the event.
He's not renting the event.
Okay,
The school is sponsoring the event, and there's a co-speaker who's written a book about. No, hold on. This is the cover for the invitation.
Yep,
I'm not
that's the
joking.
cover, Jan.
It's called The Resurgence of the KKK and Islamophobia. I'm not kidding. First time I met this clown, Mr. Hussein, was last year this time. St. Cloud Public Library, also another public building. His panel, everything is, the foundation of everything is, it's all about Islamophobia. Keep in mind, these folks only represent 2% of our population. Soon to change because of secondary migration stampeding toward Minnesota because of the free stuff, and other states like Arizona are cutting them off at the knee, so here they come. So it'll be 4 and 5. When they hit 5%, it's over. That aside, I lost my place. The presentation tomorrow night, like the one a year ago, has a foundation of a platform of Islamophobia. It's what's for dinner. Last year, he had a panel of Japanese Americans. I lived in Japan as a kid. 3 of them, one of whom spent 3 years as a child in an internment camp on the West Coast directly after Pearl Harbor. Done for very good reasons, sabotage potential. On the East Coast, it was Italian Americans and German Americans in similar camps, temporary. Mr. Hussein's equating all of this with concentration camps. My dad, during World War II, when he was in Europe, was part of those units who were going into concentration camps. I made the critical error one time of going through his footlocker without his permission. It was the only time he didn't come after me and make me pay dearly for that. And I ran across pictures of concentration camps that he took that he wasn't supposed to keep. I've seen concentration camps. Everybody in this room has seen photographs of what that looks like. This guy, Mr. KKK, was trying to equate what went on in the United States with concentration camps, and the question he was asking last October was, could this happen again? They are master victims. Just ask.
Did you see the breaking news what took place in Rochester last night, just like that?
No.
They had 2 men, they found one of the young high school students from Pine Island, and they identified him, but that's what they were doing at John Marshall High School last night. The very town we live in, that's what took place here last night.
Explain that, I don't.
KKK, two guys dressed as KKK with the black masks on, and now the Somali and the blacks in the community are railing against that because we're white supremacists.
Well, of course.
It was on the news tonight in Rochester, Minnesota.
Well, in Rochester a couple of months ago, it was back in June, you had a couple of stories pop up that caught my attention. I wasn't up and running in terms of my podcast at that point, but it was noteworthy. One of those was the bacon on the doorstep of a mosque cave.
Right.
And Jaylani comes down and he demands, we must have an investigation. And my question first indicated in my mind, because I have a cartoon bubble above my head all the time,
Were they?
was it turkey bacon? Could it have been turkey bacon? If it was, no offense. Nobody checked. So he demanded an investigation, and that didn't go anywhere because there wasn't anywhere to go. Because this is all a setup. It's done all over the country in the very same way. Let me give you another example. Rochester, Red Lobster. You had a problem. I solved that problem because similar cases were being filed in California against restaurants, cookie cutter cases, all about how we have been so mistreated, and therefore you must pay restitution, you must apologize publicly, like in the Valley, the Screamtown thing in Chaska recently, and he was a fool for doing that, but the owner. And you must go through sensitivity training. And we get to choose, Jaylani and the boys get to choose who the counselors are going to be that are going to conduct that sensitivity training. Okay. Well, I just happened to be visiting my son at UW La Crosse when I heard about the story days earlier, so I thought, I was coming back on a Sunday morning, I thought I'd swing by and visit. The manager, ironically, his name is Christian, nice guy. And I was dressed kind of like something the cat dragged in and kicked back out again. So, but I stopped by for a beer and my usual, which is raw oysters. And I sat at the bar just as they were opening, and I asked to speak to the manager. And he came over and he said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "I've got a story to tell you about a group in California that just won a 2-year lawsuit against the Council on American Islamic Relations." Then I read the story about what happened with you folks. Looks really familiar. As Yogi Berra used to say, it's like deja vu all over again. And he looks at me like I've got 3 heads, because he's from around here. It's like, wow, who's this guy? And I explained some of my background, and I said, look, you're being had, you're being played. And so he said, what do you mean? I said, well, number one, I trust that none of your employees have offended anyone. And that everybody that comes through the door, if they're not belligerent and a pain in the neck, gets treated very well. He said, well, yeah. I said, I know, because I used to run restaurants 1,000 years ago. For 10 years I did that. I said, I have a suggestion for you. I'm going to connect you up with the legal foundation that took on the case in California that won the lawsuit relative to the restaurants that were being set up there. Same thing. Same old, same old. He said, really? I said, yeah. So I sent him a boatload of information by email. And I followed up, asked him if he received it. I said, please pass it on to the powers that be. Don't knuckle into this stuff, otherwise you're done. I mean, they will be back. It'll be worse next time. So about a week and a half or 2 ago, after that, I happened to be at a Red Lobster in Bloomington, and I was just shooting the breeze with a friend of mine, 2 friends of mine, about this incident in Rochester. And I explained what had happened, and the bartender overheard what we were talking about and said, really, did that? I am. And so 5 minutes later, this woman comes out, and she said, she must have got the message wrong. She comes out, she says, can I help you? Did you have a problem with the Red Lobster? I went, no, just the opposite's true. I explained the whole deal. I feel like I'm explaining it. I'm in the Arlo Guthrie thing about Alice's restaurant here, but that's okay. So I explained the whole thing, and she said, "You're kidding." And about, I don't know, 3 minutes later, 3 guys come around the corner with suits, tall guys. They're from Orlando. They're from the home office. They wanted to hear the story about the California group. And so I shared it with them, and then I explained that I'd sent Christian here, the manager, all the information he needed to truck a horse and to put a stop to this intimidation, to a purpose. Now, Amazon out of Egan, they were dumb enough to fall for it. And here come the picket signs. We need special treatment during Ramadan because we're so weak, because we don't eat right, we don't drink right, we don't take care of ourselves. So you have to hire temps to take our place while we go sit in the shade. They fell for that. I said, don't do that. It's like the guy says, doctor, hurts when I do that. Well, he said, don't do that anymore. So, anyway, so they did listen to me. And it was about 3 weeks later, there was a story. The Orlando group said no to CARE and Jailani Hussein. They count on you backing up. Mm-hmm. They count on you. They count on submission as part of the thing called takia. 3 different phases of it. It's either by the schmooze, by the hard persuasion, or by the sword. And I'm not kidding. Good example. These guys in Minneapolis are still wanted. Armed and dangerous. And the FBI, when I call them periodically, about once every 2 months, will tell me, we can't talk about an open investigation. Still open. This guy, 87-year-old guy, for the second time in the last 9 years, last year, he was arrested for serial child rape because it's part of the culture of insanity. The last time he got, and he was, let's see, he's 87 now, so he was 78. He got 20 years probation. 20 years probation for a 79-year-old. Let's see, I'll do the math. Seriously? There was a young man who came here from Somalia it was 2 years ago, September, up in Crookston. He at knife point in December, 3 months after he got here from their happy homeland, of course. At knife point, on a Jefferson Line bus, he rapes a woman in the back of the bus and beats her. How he got away with it without the driver knowing, who knows? He got 60 days. In the end, after 8 months of fooling around in the court, and that's the other problem of the courts, kind of going, 20 years probation? And you can hardly find any news about this guy now. Reason? They don't want you to know. You have to go searching through the court records and files to even find out if it's even going to trial. Then we have these 2 cherubs. This is May 25th, 2017, and my buddy Leo Holman, formerly with WorldNet Daily, wrote this article. Minnesota Muslim released despite grenade bomb materials found. North Minneapolis. Can't make this one up. These boys were in a band. And this guy was caught in December of the prior year with an unlicensed, unregistered handgun for which he had no business. And they're both from Texas. Go figure. Then his brother and he, in May of the following year, last year, is that right? Yep. May 2017, they're in North Minneapolis in a van. An old man comes out complaining about the fact that they're throwing trash out of their van while just sitting there in North Minneapolis. So the guys get out, they threaten to shoot the man. He calls 911 because he's taking down their license plate number. About your law enforcement idea.
I remember the story.
Yeah. So the cops come, Minneapolis PD show up. They surround the van with vehicles. They tell them to get out of the van. These guys are so belligerent, they say to them, well, they want them to get away from the van. No, we can't because we're waiting for a drone delivery.
What?
Yep, that's what he said. Waiting for a drone.
They had a hand grenade, they had thousands of rounds of ammunition, AK-47, multiple handguns, and the question is, what are you doing here? Don't know anything about this now anymore either. Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman. Where are they now? Justine Damon is shot to death. Oh, this is the this is the Islam 101 presentation at the Minnesota History Center where Mr. Hussein called me a racist. He's my favorite. Anyway, Justine Damon, 40-year-old Australian-born woman, shot to death by Officer Noor. It's finally going to go to trial, I think, next April. They were going to bury that story. Her father was being interviewed on Channel 5 News about Rudsick, I think his last name is. It was gut-wrenching to watch. I went to her memorial service at Lake Harriet, the Van Shell, in August of last year. And he was not scheduled to speak, but and I was about to leave. Australian News was there, everybody was there, with the exception of Keith Ellison, Amy Klobuchar, the usual suspects. Our comatose governor shows up with Tina Smith. They sneak in the front just about the beginning of the program. Nobody can see them except me. And this guy's presentation with regard to how painful it was to have lost his daughter to a rogue cop who had failed the pre-entrance exam 3 times. I know because I know the people involved. 3 times before he even got into the fast-track training program. They tried to bury that too. And I keep reminding people, she, to my knowledge, is still dead. Shot to death by an unstable man that only, a political hire, that only because of his skin tone and national origin is this man given a gun and a badge and a license to kill. The following month, in August, she was killed July 15th. Early August, we have another Somali cop who is sworn in, I kid you not, sworn in, and on the day he's sworn in, he's arrested. Reason? He threatened to shoot his wife because they really respect women. Yeah. Shoot his wife in the head and laughed about the fact that he could get away with it. Reason? Because Officer Noor appeared to be getting away with it. They even tried to turn her into the assailant. They tried to make him the victim. And I'm telling you, and this guy's disappeared. The officer who spent 1 day on the force and maybe riding a desk, we don't know, or he's flown the coop and he's in another territory.
But you know, that whole story has never made sense from day one. The lady calls
Compared to what?
Well, I'm just saying, they said there was an assault, and the news said they drove through and never stopped. If someone calls something in, why wouldn't they? It never made sense. I'm former law enforcement. It's never made sense to me that they had a call, and they never went to the woman's home and said, you made a call, are you the one that made the call?
The driver was also a rookie cop, 1 year on the force.
The powder burns across his chest.
That's not what, yeah.
Imagine his shot. I can't imagine the guy shooting across my chest and then doesn't want to say anything and says, I got powder burns on my chest because you shot across my chest through the door at the woman that we should have stopped at the house and found out why she pounded on the back thing because she's pissed off because she called something in and no one's taking her.
She was armed with her cell phone and dressed in her pajamas. That does it for me. I'll go one step further. We had 3 arson attempts. You were in law enforcement. 3 arson attempts just in the last year and a half. 1 at St. Kate's. 8 fires set trying to burn the place down. 1 of the fires set right next to a nursery. St. Paul Cathedral, on the same morning that this supposed bombing occurred, this firebomb occurred at the Bloomington Mosque, wink, wink, nod, nod. Same morning, guy tries to burn down St. Paul Cathedral. Then, after, it was this past spring, St. Cloud, and Mayor Kleiss knows me really well because he was Senator Kleiss at the time I was serving my penance at the Capitol for 10 miserable years. But and he and I have had conversations up close and personal. I've given him a book entitled No-Go Zones, because we have those now. He hasn't even opened up the cover as an iPad. Asked Paul, as opposed, well, over the objections of one Jeff Johnson, the city councilman, not the gubernatorial candidate, who wanted to initiate a moratorium relative to all this stuff, a timeout. They then shoot him down completely, and then they declare, as part of the Welcoming Cities program, they declare St. Cloud a welcoming and just community. That's their solution to the problems in St. Cloud and Wake Park. And that place is under siege. That place is a mess, just like Wilmer. Apparently the guy who tried to blow up City Hall this past spring didn't get the message. Didn't get the memo. We're a welcoming and just community. The quote in the paper was from him, "I vote to blow you up." He said gas cans all around City Hall in St. Cloud, trying to blow the place up. And still they're going, problem? Is there a problem here? The mall attack in St. Cloud. I was in that mall that same day, headed to an Amtrak trip to the West Coast. The rape attacks, MCTC, and there have been several of them. Woman is attacked in Metropolitan State Community Technical College, or whatever they call it, downtown Minneapolis. She's trapped in a bathroom with this guy. He, while smoking a pipe full of pot, he then tries to rape her. And then when the cops get there, one female cop from Minneapolis PD, he threatens to rape her too. This is a rape-happy culture, by the way. It's a problem. And the biggest problem is, oh, and by the way, everybody know who Chuck Schumer is? CARE, according to Chuck, back in whatever day it was, CARE has ties to terrorism and intimate links with Hamas, says Senator Chuck Schumer. CARE, its leaders and its activities effectively give aid to international terrorist groups. Stephen Pomerantz, former FBI counterterrorism guy. They all know what's going on. They just don't have the courage to do anything about it. One of the problems that we face in Minnesota is that law enforcement and the courts are afraid now. Afraid of lawsuits. How many, I'll give you one good example. And we filmed this stuff, so, which makes him, Jaylani Hussein, nuts. In Stillwater, at this presentation, last April, we sat in the front row. Me and my co-producer and about 12 of us. The reason we were there that Sunday afternoon is that the Understanding the Threat tour, which was in Des Moines, Pewaukee, Wisconsin, Green Bay, Bloomington, Minnesota, and La Crosse. All, except for Des Moines, they were all shut down.
Right.
Because of threats against them by the Southern Poverty Law Center, Antifa, and CARE. So we decided on that day to go pay him a visit in Stillwater. And as David Letterman used to say, this wasn't real, could I do this? So we went to pay him a visit. We sat in the front row. We filmed it. And we caught everything he had to say, plus his PowerPoint presentation, on film. Drives him nuts, which is my intent, while smiling at him. 10 years ago, CARE filed 5 lawsuits in the state of Minnesota. Take a wild guess as to how many they filed in 2017. 360. I said that to the police commander the other day, Monday, this week, in St. Paul about my incident at the church. He said, "You've got to be kidding." He said, "Oh my God." I said, "Yeah." And with great pride, Jaylani Hussein tells everyone in the audience, we expect to exceed that number by 20% this year. Red Lobster.
You never finished the story on Red Lobster. What are the 3 businessmen We're from there, right?
They're from Orlando,
Well, no,
home office.
You never finished the story, so what?
Well, no, I'll finish it again. They listened with intensity, especially because of my oddball delivery style about the whole thing. And I was dressed pretty much like this again. And I said to them, you either face this, and I've said this to Tom Emmer, who's known me since 2005. I wouldn't vote for Tom Emmer for dog catcher. Ever again.
You mentioned the Hennepin County Sheriff, he's been in town here campaigning, what's he running for?
He's just running for his life. Rich Stanek is a turncoat. He's a sellout. And 7 years ago, he was testifying in front of Congress back in D.C. about the issue of the Somali gang problem. He was trying to tell them about, we need help here. Today, complete about face. He will enforce this. He will enforce it.
Has he, usually when people do that, they've got something on them, so they're supposed to raise return because they've done something probably not so upright and they know about it, so they're not.
It runs deeper than that. We have done stories that nobody else, and I'm talking about third rail talk, nobody else will touch. Just in the last 4 months, and it's making them all crazy. The U.S. Bank Viking Stadium scandal in August this year. Bingo. We got them, we nailed them. They had a website that they set up. It was called the Super E program. They'd done it before at the Minneapolis Convention Center, but it was always, 1,500, 2,000 people. Their website that was set up in July, and it takes a year to set up anything at the U.S. Bank Stadium. They need that much preparation time. It was nowhere in the marquee, nowhere to be seen anywhere. It was hidden from the public until we blew the whistle on it. On their website, the Super E thing, set up in July, domain name set up the day before, they indicated they had 50,000 tickets. 50,000 people, 2 days in a row. That's what they expected. Who knew about it? Nobody. Law enforcement didn't know either. And Mike Bekich, the chair of the, what do they call it, the Metropolitan Sports Facility Council, you talk about people in authority, he was hiding. He attended John Guandolo's presentation in St. Paul 3 weeks earlier. I was there, about understanding the threat. The same program that was shut down in Bloomington, La Crosse, Green Bay, and so on. He attended that presentation. I've seen John's presentation 3 times. It's compelling. You can't ignore it, because it's all about really understanding what's going on here. FBI guy, counterterrorism background, etc. Mike Bekich was in that audience. I saw him there, and a couple of other plants. He went back knowing that this was going to happen and did nothing. Nothing. He let it just unfold until we showed up the Friday before in front of their council, including, I'm trying to think, Perpich. I think one of the Perpich people were there on the council. We scared the snot out of them. There were like 15 of us. Nobody ever shows up at these things at the stadium. We did. Filmed it. And asked him some tough questions. And he said, you've got 2 minutes and there's no Q&A. So I did my best Forrest Gump. Okay. And I stood there, and I went up to the, and the guy before we got to talking was the events manager who refused to return my phone calls for 2 weeks. And Patrick Talty, I think his name is. And he's going through the PowerPoint presentation with all the events that are just about to take place in the next year or two. And it took 6 months to do this, 12 months to do that. This one, no notice at all. So I could see that he wasn't going to do anything about the problem and let this sneak up on people. So I lit him up on Monday morning. And this thing started on Wednesday morning. And I wrote him an email citing professional misconduct, professional and personal liability, and talking about his duty to inform the public about 50,000 people. sneaking up on them, which would then erupt into the Mall of America, where there have been stabbings and sexual assaults and all that stuff. And I said to him, I am going to personally make sure that you're held responsible for any problem that occurs. I'm going to make this nationally public, which I did. And we bounced it off the national news networks. They bid on it. And then it bounced back to Minneapolis or Minnesota. And it was a miracle. Monday morning, an hour and a half after I pressed send on the email, there's a press conference. Right in front of the U.S. Bank Stadium with a whole bunch of news people who were just curious, CCO, KSDP, Channel 11, you name it, they're all there. It's a miracle. They're all interested now. And you've got like 8 Somali elders doing what I call the Somali battle, which makes no earthly sense to anybody. But they talked and talked and talked about it. Esme Murphy reports, and it starts the following morning at 6:30, according to the schedule, in the morning. Until that point, no one knew. That's disgraceful. That's dangerous, and that's what I pointed out to Mike Beckich. That's dangerous. 50,000 people. I said to Mike, after the meeting was over on Friday, before this happened, where are they going to go? Are they going to stay in the building? No, they're not going to go. Well, it starts at 6:30, it ends at 11:30. Who's going to do the security sweep of the building after they've gone? He said, well, I don't know what you're implying. I said, I can say it slower for you. He says, that's not funny. I said, well, it's a little funny. Who is going to chase these people out if they don't want to go? And Super Eat is all about the sacrifice of the, it's been a couple of months, they sacrifice animals. They skin them alive. Turn them upside down, skin them alive, and that's how they, purify their animals. This is 7th century stuff. So they assured everybody in the news they weren't going to skin any animals inside the stadium, but maybe off-site somewhere else at an undisclosed location they would. Jaylani Hussein calls the Minneapolis PD in the afternoon before the thing starts at 6:30 in the morning and says, we need security. It's a miracle. It's the first time that the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport knew about it, the police authority. Well, me, the PD didn't know. I know because I spoke to a police commander saying, gird your loins, because right on the light rail system, here they come to the Mall of America, just like they did 2 years ago, Stampede, 1,000 people. No notice. Rampage through the mall. It's still up. You can catch it on YouTube. Scared the hell out of people, and rightly so. Took over what used to be laughingly called Camp Snoopy when I used to be a chaperone for my kids when they were attending school at Minnehaha Academy. No longer. It's dangerous. Another place my kids and grandkids will not go again, ever, just like Valley Fair. The problem is denial. The problem is this kind of thing is being ignored. Except by me and a few other people who are interested, like Bradley Dean Smith with Sons of Liberty Radio. The other problem is, this is the consequence. Really, denial is dangerous. The other thing I haven't talked about, I'm trying so hard not to beat you up tonight, but I'm not doing a very good job of it. And by the way, Jaylani sneaks into other churches just to observe if someone who is making a presentation, another kind of pastor is suggesting, don't buy it. So he sneaks into churches in Cambridge, Minnesota. He got caught though. Oh, and I love this. This is priceless. Esme Murphy. She interviewed Ilhan Omar. They both share the same attorney, so Esme, in her infinite wisdom as a broadcast journalist, decides to interview Ilhan to ask her about questions relating to Keith Ellison. Go figure. Here's the other problem. female genital mutilation. FMG, it's 7th century brutality. It's also not only unsafe, unsanitary, but it also creates a myriad of other problems that have to be repaired at taxpayer cost, by the way, of these little girls who are mutilated. Another article. This is true. One of my associates, his name is Professor John Palmer, Professor Emeritus, St. Cloud State University. His presentations are as dry as toast, but he's brilliant. He did an analysis of the communicable diseases in Minnesota. We have an 80% share of the measles outbreak for the entire country right here in Minnesota. 80% in pockets all over Minnesota. In the same areas, we have active tuberculosis. Gee, what a shocker. He identified through the Minnesota Department of Health and their statistical database, just active tuberculosis diagnosed between 2012 and 2015 alone, 747 cases of active tuberculosis throughout the state of Minnesota. 740. Do you know how communicable that is? How catchy that is? Back to my question, how many body bags and hospital beds have to be filled before Minnesotans wake up? Then, the other 18 diseases having been identified by CDC, not only with regard to the refugee resettlement program, folks, but also I'm sure you're familiar with the caravan coming up from Central and South America. 20 diseases, many of them we've not seen in this country for 150 years. And they're stampeding toward the United States, and by way of the sanctuary city public policy, if Mr. Ellison becomes Attorney General, this becomes a sanctuary state. Mm-hmm. Just like Minneapolis is St. Paul and a number of other cities in Minnesota. Then we're done. That's as much as I can ruin your evening, except to say this guy is real, and he has 9 other friends just like him. How many people are familiar with rules for radicals? You mentioned the red-green axis. Yeah. Yeah. By Saul Alinsky, a deplorable human being. There's a special place in Guess Where for him. Well, the companion piece relative to this issue is called Milestones, and you should read it. Short read, very enlightening. A longer read, one of the people I've interviewed recently is Trevor Loudon from New Zealand. Brilliant, brilliant. Worth, it's a short read, not so much, but worth every minute to read it. Another book, we talk about the red-green axis. Back in Hitler's day, it was the Turks and the Grand Mufti. In fact, my dad fought in North Africa against stormtroopers who were the Turks. They were dressed up in Nazi stormtrooper uniforms, and Hitler had a particular name for them that wasn't particularly kind, but basically cannon fodder. So this has been going on a long time. Now we have the red-green axis between, this is written by Jay Sekulow, Unholy Alliance, the Russians. The objective? Destroy the United States, one way or another. And another read that is, oh, by the way, I haven't talked about one of our other stories. Oh, and I love this one. Trevor Loudon and Spencer are so hated by Ellison. Ellison had the nerve to write Jeff Bezos with Amazon and demanded, because he is, after all, himself, Mr. Ellison, demanded that Jeff Bezos take down all these books, burn these books, Trevor Loudon's books, Robert Spencer's books, any kind of paraphernalia relating to his view of anything anti-Islamic, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure he's still waiting for the response from Mr. Bezos. I would hope. Robert Spencer's book, Complete Infidel's Guide to Free Speech. I made a joke earlier, I heard it last night on Sean Hannity's program. Dennis Prager was being interviewed along with Alan Carillo, I think his last name. He's a comedian. And they were paraphrasing what's his name? Gosh, it was a comedian, a Russian comedian. And he said, we have, about free speech, we have free speech in Russia. The difference between Russia and the UK is we have free speech in Russia and in the United States, not the UK, the United States. In the United States we have free speech and you get to live. Ashes to Glory, Pastor Ramin Parza, one of my favorite projects. Pastor Parza was here in, well, let me back up. He's internationally famous. He was part of an Aeromexico, airline crash in Mexico on July 31st this year. He is credited with saving 91 passengers and crew, not only with prayer. He's born in Iran, converted to Christianity. He serves as a Christian pastor in California. He was here to present at a local Hispanic Christian church in August. On July 31st, this man was a hero internationally for saving all the passengers. He ripped the door off the plane, and you should see the plane. It's a miracle, and they all said that anybody survived, let alone everybody on that plane. Pastor Parza then comes to Minnesota, puts on a presentation at a local church. The local pastor, and his 14-year-old son and Pastor Parza go to the Mall of America because he's never seen it before. Shorts, sandals, no clerical garb at all. He gets arrested. Two Somali women, and his accent attracted him to them. The way he looks, he's 32 years old. They engaged him and wanted to, because the two pastors just happened to be talking as they were waiting to go into Starbucks at the Mall of America. And they engaged him, wanted to know, why did he convert? You must be Muslim. No, I'm Christian. I'm a Christian pastor, he told them. So they wanted to know why. So they were curious, these two young ladies. And obviously he's a handsome guy, so there's that attraction. A third Somali woman comes over and starts berating everybody, beating up on the pastor verbally, as well as the two girls. They exchange words, the two women, and the third one telling that they asked him, etc. They're defending the pastor. She takes off. She went and got mall security, who I've engaged personally to find out that every word of his story is true. They tried to arrest me too for doing this. Can I ask you a question? In any event, he and the other pastor and the young man go into Starbucks. They disengage because the security guy came out and said, you can't talk about Christianity in the mall, period. And, can't make this up. And you can't solicit. They're in shorts and sandals. They said, well, the girls wanted to talk to us. You have to cease and desist, or we'll have to ask you to leave. They both said, oh, okay. So they took off. They went to Starbucks. They're in there for half an hour. Mall cop stands out there talking, to people, and they're in there for about half an hour. The three of them get up. They're going to take a stroll. They come out. There's three mall cops. Now they arrest him. They tell him he's under arrest. They escort the other pastor and the child out of the building to the parking lot, which they did to me too about 4 days after that, for doing nothing except just ask some questions. And so they take him to Mall Cop prison. In the basement, they shackle him to they also put handcuffs on him behind his back in the mall. The other pastor has no idea where he's going. They take him to the basement. They shackle him to a steel chair bolted to the floor. At which point they keep him there for 2 hours and 25, about 2 hours and 15 minutes. Won't give him water, won't give him a bathroom break. And they try to barter water for a picture because they want to put him on the terror watch list. True, and that's true. They won't call Bloomington PD. They won't adhere to his request for an attorney. They keep him there. It started at 7:30 in the evening. By the time Bloomington PD showed up, they took the report. They take him to the Bloomington Police Department. They book him and release him on a 70, and he never gets the chance to talk to an attorney. No Miranda rights, nothing. I know. That's what I did. You know. It starts at 7:30 in the evening, and it ends at 1:30 in the morning. The other pastor is fine. Then they finally give him a phone call. The other pastor comes and picks him up. The criminal case has been $78 bail. He lives in California. They're going to force him to come back here. Have a local attorney through the...
What's the charge?
Oh, criminal trespass.
How can it be criminal trespass? Did they ask him to leave?
No, they didn't. They threatened to ask him to leave if he didn't stop. Well, he stopped.
You need to get a good attorney.
He already has a great attorney. We got him one through a legal defense fund, and they're going to... Plus, I also have great connections with organizations. Some of you may be familiar with Nest Judicial Watch out of DC. They've investigated lots of stuff. I've thrown their way. Judicial Watch, without being asked, has contacted me just in the last couple of days and asked, is he going to be represented in the civil rights portion of this situation? I said, no. Would you like us to do it? Yep. And that's what's going to happen. He's got a great lawyer here who's going to take care of the criminal issue. In fact, they go to the hearing, not pastor, he doesn't have to, but the attorney will, on Election Day, November 6th. I will be there just to watch, because I like watching.
After you vote.
Huh?
After you vote.
No, of course. But here's my point. And then I'm going to end with this, take any questions you might have. But this kind of stuff, and this is his book, From Ashes to Glory. He's a great man, good guy, solid guy. And by the way, he suffers from PTSD because he has been tortured in his home country of Iran, tortured in Turkey, just for leading his ministry there as well as in the United States. When all of this broke relative to our breaking the story on the national scene, because the local people wouldn't touch it, his family in Iran have been arrested for having Bibles. So that's what we're up against here. And we're also up against, well, the mainstream media here is awful. Law enforcement, afraid and uninformed, many of them, not all of them. And people are unaware. And so I'm begging, in fact, that you do your level best to do what you're talking about doing, that's getting involved. Questions, anybody? Yeah.
Before everybody leaves, would you share with us where are the no-go areas in Minnesota?
Well, one is the Minneapolis Cedar Riverside area, and they have a no-go area in, I said that to Mayor Kleiss, in St. Cloud, and also Waite Park. Wilmer is a mess. There are places there you can't go. Faribault, I think there are 20,000 people down there. But I meant to share something with you very briefly, and I didn't get to that. And that's the very reason I got involved with this in the first place. And I will find it if it kills me. I used to just comment on Facebook about one thing and another. And I came home from a business trip September of last year. And I was presented with, I think I've destroyed my stuff here. I was presented with a note on my door. And I live in the country in St. Michael. Hard to find me. I came home on a Friday night, I've been gone for 5 days, took my German Shepherd out in the dark and put him away, and in the following morning came outside and happened to notice this note on the door. And in vertical cut and paste, vertical words, it said, "We see you on Facebook." And I didn't even report it initially, until about 3 weeks later, my shepherd set off my alarm by beating me to the front door. And I was greeted by a Wright County sheriff, a large guy, bigger than me, on my front porch in front of my kitchen window. I happen to turn around, I see this huge man doing this. So, because I am nervous about or aware of my surroundings, always. So I came to the door, and the sheriff came in, and he said, "Your alarm went off." I said, "I didn't know that, I didn't hear anything." He said, "Well, is everything okay?" And he asked for my ID. I presented it to him, and I said, "I apologize," and he loved my dog, because he's gorgeous. And he really is. And I said, "I'm sorry I reacted the way I did," and he saw my handgun on my island. And I said, "I have a carry permit." And he said, I thought you would. He said, "But why were you so startled?" I said, "Well, I received a note on my door about 3 weeks ago." Explained it. He said, "Did you report it?" I said, "No. I didn't see any point." He said, "Well, do you mind if I write up a report?" I said, "Sure." And he did. And he said, "Can I have a copy of it?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Look, when you leave town," because I travel for business. This is not what I do, by the way. This isn't my career. Some people collect baseball cards and stamps. This is what I do. Anyway, he said, "Well, when you leave town, let us know. You have a sheriff right down the street." I said, "Yeah, I've seen his squad car before. Let us know if you're going to be out of town for 2, 3, 4 days," that kind of thing. That's what started me on this path. And that's what caused me to go to the St. Cloud Public Library to see Jaylani Hussein the first time with the Japanese American group. When I left that room, and I did not say a word, I did not have a camera, I had nothing that day. I was there with some people I knew. And I watched him berate women who asked him tough questions about CARE's connection with Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood. Will you disavow that connection, etc.? And he would not do that. And then he stood up there and he said, in a fit of anger, he stood there, and as he was just about to make his last speech, 8 Somali men, about that tall, all dressed in dark clothing, walked in single file at the end of a 2-hour presentation, positioned themselves in the back of the room and at the corners like the Praetorian Guard. I stood up and took notice and smiled, didn't say anything. And then he says to the crowd, "We will not be intimidated, we will not be silenced, and we now carry a big stick." He was angry. That did it. So that is why I am here. I have children and grandchildren to protect. And frankly, I have lived here 47 years. I love Minnesota, but if it keeps going the way it's going, I'm out of here. And my kids, my son's already in lacrosse, drilling down roots permanently. And after the scare at Valley Fair, my daughter, my son-in-law, and my grandchildren, I tried to get my grandson to go back, and granddaughter to go back to Valley Fair with me. I said, "I'll go with you," because then they told me the story. My grandson, who's 10 years old, said, "Grandpa, what are you going to do about this?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, you do stuff." I said, "Well, yeah, I kind of do." And he said, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'm doing some things, but I'd rather not talk about it right now, Ethan." And my kids and grandkids will follow me if I have to leave. Minnesota, and these are their own words at the U.S. Bank Stadium, people, in an interview, you are being colonized.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they said. The guy interviewing his own group of people, and he said, "How does it feel to be colonizing the U.S. Bank Viking Stadium in Minnesota?" Colonizing. So who asked the question about no-go zones?
Yeah, I did.
Everywhere. Cedar Riverside, they're building a wall around it.
This is, I had a question very closely related to that, and I'm concerned about Rochester in particular.
I would be too.
as we think about Rochester and our neighborhoods, what would be, I'm gonna call it infiltration. What is the pattern of infiltration for which we're looking for? Because, I do not believe until we see something tangible, this group does, but most of us, until we see that something tangible, like a no-go zone, that we're gonna start understanding what's happening. So what is,
Well, I can tell you the beginning of it.
please?
All right. Walter Hudson, anybody know him? Radio? iHeartRadio? It's called the, I call it the Final Curtain, but it's Closing Argument is his program. Walter is a radio guy every night, 2 hours, hates me. He won't go on air with me and debate or even have a conversation. He's afraid. Walter sees all of this, and he claims to be a Republican. That's a joke. He claims that this is all about a comparative religions of the world conversation. Apparently he doesn't know anything, he doesn't know anything about Islam at all. 1,400 years of misery. That's why there were the Crusades, the pushback. It starts with the code words, the dog whistle of affordable housing. Low-income housing. As soon as that happens, here they come. I used to do this when I used to testify at the Capitol. We were talking about welfare reform at that time, when I was serving down there. And I talked about Tommy Thompson next door, about workfare, and other states that were getting the message and the memo, the Welfare Reform Act of '96 that Mr. Clinton begrudgingly signed into law. And I used to do this when I testified on there. Here we come. From Detroit, from Atlanta, from Chicago. And I used to tell people on radio, we are going to become the next Detroit if we're not careful. And that's before all of this. That was just the welfare problem.
That's a tie-in to what, you're asking about the affordable housing and about what's going on. The biggest proprietors of the flush of refugees is under the guise of Christianity. It's under the Roman Catholic Church. It's under the Lutheran social.
Oh, Lutheran Social Services, Catholic Charities.
Both of them are in tie, and I do not for the life of me, I am a devout Catholic, for the life of me, and for Christ, I do not understand how the church is involved in this, and I have railed against our bishop in this diocese, and the bishop and the archbishop up in St. Paul. I do not know why they're in bed with these people, and why they think it's important under the guise of Christianity.
For the same reasons, I was bounced out of that church last Wednesday, the St. John, the evangelist.
What I get when I talk to my pastors and the people in this community and the Christianity, we need to have dialogue with these people, and we need to understand them. I said, the only dialogue you need is that you're a Christian, and there's nothing else. You don't need to dialogue with Satan.
Well,
And there's nothing that you can gain from dialoguing with these people,
But
because
you
they
can't
are not dialogue people.
you cannot convince these people that that's exactly what they are doing. My conversation with the pastor with St. John's last Monday, I was very nice, very polite, but I said, there was a thing called the Trojan horse years ago.
Okay?
Yeah, been in all the papers.
It's why the Crusades happened, just what you just
Exactly.
said.
But-
And
but-
nobody wants to allow that to happen, because the minute you start fighting back and talking back, and I'm tired of being quiet about it, I'm tired of being nice about it. You're up there and saying, I'm smiling at these people, well, I'm pissed off. And I think we need more people to be pissed off.
Well,
In
I get what you're saying.
the zealousness of what Christ did in the temple.
I learned something, however, not to interrupt, sorry, but I learned something years ago when I was doing my thing at the Capitol. And that is that the more reserved and quiet I was, the crazier the other side got. The more I refused to give up my ground, the crazier they got. The more I smiled at them when they were trying to force me to give up their ground, give up my ground, rather, the crazier they got. Jailani Hussein taking this kind of a step, and locking arms with someone that is promoting a book about the resurgence of the KKK and how that links up to Islamophobia industry. That's me. Now we're in the insane lane. So,
I'm not saying in the manner of being out. I'm saying the zealousness needs to be there, and we need to act on things.
but you have to remain.
But you need to remain focused. You need to remain in Christ and in that zealousness, because that's you know.
Let me share with you 2 lines from movies, because I'm a movie fanatic. One of those is a movie entitled Hoosiers, and one of the coaches says, you know, it's one thing if a guy runs out in that cornfield, takes off all of his clothes and howls at the moon. I can kind of ignore that. If he does the same thing in my living room, I kind of have to take notice. I agree with that. And I'm taking notice. They're in my living room. And they're in your living room also. The problem that we face, though, is if we get too about it, then we play right into their hands, because then we look like the very same thing that is reflected badly in this police report from last Wednesday, and the officer was kind enough to write it up properly. Then we play into their hands, and they got you. So remaining calm and collected, and with a sick and twisted sense of humor like mine, tends to work because it makes them go crazy. And so I want them to behave that way, because it really, in the more out of control they appear, the more in control I am. I've been doing this a long time. Do I want to be here? No. I want to be fishing in Yakutat, Alaska right now, with my friends who just came back with all that sound. So that's all I have to say about this. Question?
Keeping in line with what Mike had said about the idea of things working its way into various churches and such, that type of that level of tolerance, which is really more of an invitation more than tolerance in certain situations. I believe, and I submit, that it all stems from the concept of political correctness.
Of course it does.
Political correctness is another form of telling people that you're afraid.
I asked Walter Hudson on radio, and this is how he was mistreating Philip Parrish in an interview. That's why somebody said, you got to listen to this thing. So it's the first time I ever heard this guy. And I heard what he was doing to Philip, a good guy. And so I called in, and I was surprised to get past the screener when I said, look, I have a question for Walter. He said, what's the question? I'd like him to tell me where, on the whole planet, show me where this totalitarian political ideology masquerading as a religion and hiding behind our U.S. Constitution in the United States and Bill of Rights. Show me where this is working anywhere in the whole planet. You've got the whole globe to choose from. Western Europe, the United Kingdom, Australia. Show me. He said, we don't have to go to the whole planet. Everything. He started screaming at me on air. He lost it. I said, well, okay, how about Dearborn, Michigan?
Bob.
Show me. That's where Keith Ellison comes from. So you have to present that kind of a question. Yes.
As they continue to attack our civic and religious holidays, or even fun ones like Halloween, I'm reminded that on the Arabian Peninsula 1,400 years ago, there was multiculturalism. There was vibrant multiculturalism. There was a diversity, a plethora of religions. There were Christian churches in the area now known as Saudi Arabia. There were Jewish temples, synagogues. There were Buddhists living there. There were Hindus. There were Zoroastrians. There were various pagan groups. And the monolithic,
before Muhammad, BM, if you will, there was a plethora of cultures. And now there's just a monolithic culture. 100 years later, all those languages are gone. All those other civilizations, all those other worlds are gone. Then they come to Minnesota and they, in the guise of multiculturalism and diversity, they tell us, you must accept, you must celebrate Ramadan.
Well,
at the...
I asked Jaylani Hussein a question, made him crazy. I make him crazy no matter what. I enjoy that. So I said to him, how many Christians and Jews are in Somalia?
Boom.
What do you think?
Right.
He looked at me and said, I don't understand. I said, I'm going to ask it slowly.
Yeah.
Zero. So you come here and ask Linda Sarsour, the radical Palestinian born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, who really ought to be in prison for sedition. Yeah. Who says, you must not assimilate. She's a hateful human being, who is a pal of Ilhan Omar's, by the way. This is what we're up against. This is about integration, this is about confiscation, and this is about domination. Pardon me, I feel like I'm a preacher or something. So that's what this is about. And if you complain, is criticizing Islam a form of mental illness? I say no. And I vote no for this.
They're going to be doing that in the churches in Rochester in the next couple of weeks. There's a new series of events. They've just started advertising. Yeah.
I'll be the first one to admit I have issues. When I do this with my kids, oh, it's Dad, oh, Dad, I have issues. I don't have this issue. I see this very clearly. And you should too, each one of you. And do your level best to stand up with a smile on your face and fight back. Because it's costing us in more ways than one. Just the illegal immigration in Minnesota is costing Minnesota taxpayers on a net basis, net, of every dollar is put back into the system, $1 billion a year. It's a whole Viking stadium a year. That's the illegal immigration bill, which Keith Ellison supports, by the way. Then you have the refugee resettlement thing through Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services, and all those programs, and that's burying us too. They get $2,200 a head for parachuting them in, and Grand Rapids is under siege as we speak, right now. They're trying to get them to sign the mayor's compact up there, and they're resisting, and they should. Beyond that, pardon? Minnesota. Beyond that, I really, yes, sir.
I got a good one today. I listened to 89.1, the Spring Valley Christian Station, BCY, and they were telling on there that the National Guard was putting out signs that said Happy Ramadan.
I know.
Yeah.
I know, it's unconscionable.
There are churches that are killing us.
Well, and on a different note, but connected to the military, you know who, what's his name? The guy that was released in Afghanistan for Bergdahl. Yeah, you know that I think 5 guys that were traded, they're back on the battlefield again. Yeah, I mean, you can't make this stuff up, and you know, in the words of Forrest Gump's mother, stupid as the stupid does. And that's what we're up against here in Minnesota. And right now we're talking about self-defense. Yes, sir.
Part of the reason to answer this gentleman's question or concern about the Catholic Church is that there's a subtle strain of thinking in both the Catholic Church and Lutheran services that it's literally called population replacement, in which if we have more and more American people leave the church for whatever reason, leave the Catholic Church because of the pedophile thing, or Lutheran services, the Lutheran Church going down because it's just not as politically correct. The way to keep the church alive and vibrant is to bring refugees in here, and we will replace the population with new people.
And good luck with that.
I agree with
That,
that.
all right, so our group hug is better than anybody else's group hug around the globe where it hasn't worked, like Sweden, Denmark, Norway, the United Kingdom, that are separate, Spain. No, that's nonsense. You can't assimilate with people who are not wanting to assimilate back. All my grandparents came here through Ellis Island. They came here for an opportunity. I wrote about it. There's a piece back there, I think somebody reprinted, entitled Jailani Hussein, Their Plan versus Our Country. You can pick up a piece as you leave. That's what this is about. We have our U.S. Constitution, our country, our Bill of Rights. They want to replace that. They're not here to adhere to our system of governance. That's not their goal. Their goal is to confiscate and overwhelm and then dominate, either by the schmooze or by way of what they call the jizya, which is their tax, welfare, in our case, forced welfare, or, in the end, the sword. That's it. And you can't hug them out of it, you can't talk them out of it, and in the end, if you press them like I do Mr. Hussein, he reacts and overreacts by wanting to become violent. And I think what he did by having the police department there and security there to boot me out of that church for doing nothing was a form of assault. And I'm about to prove that to him in court. So he's in for a surprise. Sir?
You said in a recording last week that I listened to on my computer. There's a mosque in Roosevelt High School in Minneapolis?
There is.
Are there other high schools that have mosques?
I don't know, but I know for a fact that there is one in Roosevelt. There's also a room 316 at the Capitol, and you can look it up online. It's supposed to be a traveling exhibit. It's not a traveling exhibit. It's been there for 2 years. It's a mosque inside one of our state office buildings. In fact, the state office building. Look it up online. You'll see it on there. In the foyer of the Star Tribune is a picture of Ilhan, of portrait. How sweet. I know, I'm all warm and fuzzy about that.
Not by SNL, right?
Sir?
You mentioned the charter schools and that they're doing stuff with that. We have an Islamic charter school in Rochester that's 99% Somali. How are they milking the system there? What are they?
Well, subsidize this, subsidize that. They're teaching Sharia law, which is against the law, within that school system. It's a public school, public dollars are going to.
There's no oversight on it.
Of course not.
Nobody checks on them.
No. And on November 6th or before, what I'm most afraid of when it comes to this election are people going from poll to poll and voting multiple times, kind of like Chicago, Mayor Daley Chicago, vote early, vote often, and nobody challenging them simply because they're wearing a burqa or a hijab.
You know, that school down he's talking about on 16th Street Southwest, they're doubling the size of it right now for another millions of dollars. That Minnesota Housing is part of it, and one of our senators right now in the city of Rochester, Minnesota, is supporting it.
Carla Nelson.
Yeah. And they now have 9 school buses. They just bought 5 more brand new Honda vans, and the MnDOT came in and said you cannot operate those vans until you make them compliant with what MnDOT rules are for transporting people. They're trying to appeal that right now, but the vans are confiscated in a parking lot right now. I know where it's at until they get them compliant. They think they've got another 9, maybe more buses ordered to pick up the pace on what's going on right there in part of Rochester. So what it is domination through intimidation. And wake up.
And an or else. And the or else is Jailani Hussein, Mr. 360 lawsuits last year alone. It'll be 380 to 400 this year alone. Will file a lawsuit. Now I happen to know that CARE is being sued by an out-of-state, as we speak, an out-of-state legal foundation in conjunction with, they're suing the Minnesota Department of Education about that mosque issue, and also trying to cram Sharia law into the curriculum. The pressure is coming from outside of Minnesota, not as much from inside, because everybody wants to go along to get along. Nobody wants to be seen like Scott Stillman, the whistleblower, as a pariah. This poor guy, he's done for in Minnesota. He knows it. They're planning on leaving. I don't blame him, and I wouldn't let anybody know where I was going, because he's told the truth. That's the problem too. So, by the way, I don't know whether you picked up, and this is a piece that I just love. Amy Klobuchar, Keith Ellison, Tom Emmer. All, terrible. I've known, like I said, I've known Tom since 2005. I supported him for the governor's race. I supported him for the with 2 votes of mine for Congress. I wouldn't touch it. He actually, this is no kidding, he actually worked for a George Soros organization called National Popular Vote.
Oh.
National Popular Vote's and so this is a Soros thing, just like the Secretary of State project, until we shut him down by exposing him way back then, in 2008 and 9. National Popular Vote's entire objective is to do away with the Electoral College. That would make New York, California, Chicago rule the country. We would have no electoral say. Our country's done. Then it becomes Hillary's America.
And then they want to use electronic voting only, no paper ballot.
Yes. I heard a commercial done by Steve Simon, our Secretary of State, today about enhancing the vote. I remember one election, I can't remember what year it was, we had 18,000 overvotes. That means more people voted, 18,000, than actually registered to vote.
Are you saying my daddy can't vote just because he's dead?
Use your own best judgment.
Okay.
Yeah. If you can prop him up and get him along, like in Bernie's, what was Weekend at Bernie's, if you can prop him up and play some music and he dances along, then he gets to vote.
Well, that's what's called an absentee ballot.
Extremely absentee. Yeah, and I remember when Mark Ritchie, during the election of Al Franken by 325 or 15,000, and sadly, I interviewed Norm Coleman when he was running for Congress the first time. Good guy, way too timid. He should have challenged that big time. And he had the wrong attorney who was playing for the other team, sadly. But they ended up finding 1,900 illegal felons that had voted, a bunch of people that were dead that voted, probably one of your relatives.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so, and nobody challenged it. Nobody said, let's have a do-over or something. It's amazing. I have faith in the silent majority in Minnesota. Before the 2016 election, I caught wind of a story about Minnesota high schoolers. They did a mock election in Minnesota. And Mr. Trump won high schoolers by 2%. So I thought, aha, I'm onto something here. So I contacted, and this is right after Mike Pence was chosen as his running mate. So I contacted people I know in Fort Wayne, Missouri Synod Lutheran type folks, who connected me up with the chief of staff for Mike Pence. And I called him up and I said, my name is, and I know this guy, and he asked me to give you a call, here's 'cause why. And he laughed and I said, I'm calling you because I've got some good news for you and some bad news for you. The good news is Mike Pence is going to be the next Vice President of the United States. The bad news is you're going to lose an incredible governor and a good man. He laughed and he said, oh yeah, so what's your point here? I said, well, in Minnesota, I noticed that they're going to Milwaukee and Michigan and some other places. I said, in Minnesota, the high schoolers voted for Mr. Trump. I think the high schoolers are smarter than the adults. And less corrupt. There's almost no voter fraud with those guys and gals. He said, what are you talking about? So I explained. He said, can you send me some articles? I said, I'm trying to get through to the Trump people in New York, but no way. He said, look, you get me everything you can, I'll get it to them. I said, do I have your word on that? He said, don't push it. I said, fine. I said, yeah, I'll get you all the articles and everything I can. So I received a phone call about 3 days later, and it was somebody with the Trump campaign out of New York, and we were speaking the same language. It was great to hear the accent and the attitude. And he said, did this really happen? I said, yeah, it did. He said, well, what would you like us to do? I said, stop in. Don't ignore Minnesota. I think you're maybe surprised. And it was about, he said, I'll work on that. It was about 4 or 5 days later, I got another phone call that they were coming to the Sun Country airline hangar with the Trump plane, and it was like 3 days notice before the election. They showed up on a Sunday, the election was on Tuesday. 25,000 people showed up with no notice. The hangar was, I got a special spot because it's a joke. But, and the Minnesota media was there, ready to, chomp at the bit to tear him a new one, I think. But anyway, 25,000 people showed up. The hangar was completely filled. The overflow was way out there. They had to walk a mile, some of these people, just to get there.
I was one of them guys.
Yeah, were you?
More than a mile.
Well, I have my disability sticker, so I got a special spot to it at the park. So, yeah, and in the election, and I can't remember who I said this to earlier, but you have to factor in Minnesota because this is the way it is. 4% for voter fraud. 4%. I know I did a lot of work on that score a while back. I actually brought Fox News in here, persuaded them for 10 months to come in here to do their own investigation about voter fraud, which they did, and they found he's right. In fact, I was a little short on my numbers. So he loses in Minnesota by 1.5%, which means he won in Minnesota. And he was just up in Duluth a while back, and there's 10,000 people there. My guess is, I think instinctively, Minnesotans know there's something wrong, they just don't know what that is. They got an itch they can't scratch. And they're starting to act on it. And if they act in their own self-interest and self-defense, and I've said this to a crowd in St. Cloud, I said, look, all gray hair, white hair people. And I looked at them, I said, I said, how many people by a show of hands have children? Oh, the hands flew up. I said, how about grandchildren? Hands flew up again. I said, that's who you're fighting for. I've led a blessed life. I should have been dead years ago, and that's no kidding. But I went this way versus that way. My claim to fame in this life is, yeah, I survived basic training for 14 years as a kid, and I also knocked Bruce Springsteen out with a fastball during baseball practice back in Jersey. The guy could never pay attention, even now. My buddies, especially my backup catcher, and I was the catcher, by the way, pitching. Go figure. So anyway, my backup catcher, Wayne Mancini, when I go back, he says, it's your fault. Everything that comes out of Bruce's mouth is your fault, because you knocked him flat on his butt because he never paid attention. Couldn't catch a cold in the outfield. But I'm just, I guess what I'm saying to you is, this is, it's not about me. None of this is about me. I'm not that important. What is important are your kids, your grandkids, and your state, and my children also. And I said this to Mayor Kleiss, up close and personal. I said, if anything ever happened to one of my children or grandchildren because of this kind of malfeasance and betrayal of the public trust, there'd be no measure to my resolve to deal with that issue. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? If you let somebody go in there for 60 days, we're saying hello on the 61st day. How you doing? I won't put up with it. I'm not going to stand by while one of my children or grandchildren are hurt. When my kids, my daughter and my son-in-law, who I love dearly, like my own son, remember when we met, I shook his hand when they were 16, would let it go, and tried to pull away. How you doing? Just want you to know, I love my daughter. Oh yeah, okay. We're going to try it again. Just want you to know how much I love my daughter. Oh yeah, okay. Third time was the charm. He said, okay, Mr. Carillo, okay, we're on. Have her home by 10 o'clock. Yeah. I love my kids and grandkids, and I have great friends here. And everybody has to step up and do what they can to be a part of the solution, not the problem. And with that, I quit, unless you have another question.
Dave, the question there when you bring up that town memory. You know, I was up at the rally up at Duluth for Trump and the rally down here in Rochester, and it seems like Trump loves the man.
Not so, I don't think,
know, or?
I don't think he knows.
Oh, okay.
I went to the convention as a delegate,
Yeah?
and Tom is hearing footsteps. He stood up there and made the most incredible speech. It was angry on a Friday morning, and I could tell he was talking right to me. We don't have to like each other. You know, he was just barking at people. He knows what he has done. He created the Somali caucus.
Right.
He supports remittances, the Hawala business.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't give a rip about all the money that's been stolen. He says that, oh, that's not my job. He supports the Cuban, the lifting of the Cuban embargo. Was he nuts? He thinks the Castro brothers are dead? Not so much.
So he's kind of a hypocrite.
Yep, not kind of. You can scratch the kind of. Tom has sold out. And then the George Soros thing. And it's a sad state of affairs. Please vote for Doug Wardlow. I'm not telling you what to do, but please. And Mr. Howe for Secretary of State, the guy's brilliant and he's got guts. I like that. He's smart. And gosh, who else? Oh, Karen Housley, much better candidate, and Jeff Johnson also. I'm sorry.
Well, we should have pushed for Jim Newberger.
Oh, Jim, I forgot. Jim Newberger, I interviewed him on 4 segments. They're out there on YouTube through Third Rail Talk. And by the way, some of you have this piece, some of you don't, I don't know. But look, you know, I'm really horrible at asking people, not just to pass the plate, but if you're so disposed, there's a way for you to contribute to Third Rail Talk. Mainstream media has abandoned the field of play. That's why we're doing what we're doing, reporting on these stories. We're taking their place. I said that to the news director at Channel 9. She didn't like it very much. I also pointed out that Tom Lydon and she and the station committed fraud when they put that piece up with my face on it. So anyway, listen, remember this guy? Remember this guy.
Thank you.
Near and dear to my heart for a variety of reasons. Number 1, I was born there, Fort Bragg. Number 2, he gave his life as a hero serving his country. And Minnesota taxpayer dollars inadvertently paid for his death. So remember that. Thank you.
Okay, before you guys go, I've got something for you. We were just talking about that STEM system, where they're taking over the school. They're also taking over the Christian college. And you're wondering how this is all happening? I bought this out of my own company. It's a new book by Robert Spencer. It's a small one. It's called Reading, Writing, and Jihading. It'll make you sick what goes on in kindergarten through high school. So you all get one before you go. So get one off me, okay?
Last week's Trevor Loudon video is available, and I'll be sending it to everybody a link. If we could have a blessing from somebody who feels led. Sir?
We're going to turn the lights out and turn your light on, because that's what we're called to do, is to be a light unto the world. Be a light unto the world. And Father, we just thank you that we've got a man that's got a lot of passion, that you give him protection, give him provision. And Father, till we gather again, may our light shine in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
You're making it. We're so fortunate to.
Oh, by the way, before you leave, anybody remember this guy? I remember this guy. Give me John Wayne.
Very often. I see your tracks around.
I got to bring your kids on that.
It's a good book.
Yeah, we have to wait.
It makes you sick.
Australia going on. On the west side totally is
So you walk that mile to see them?
We didn't
This is still.
And I went to the website to go, well, maybe they just forgot something. And there was no video. And he said, well, I need to search for this because that shouldn't happen. So he actually told me by
A meeting taking place about some of this stuff because
just to get on the same page.
Yeah, because the info has to be.
Well, we'll see you at the next one.
The info has to be shared. Well, yes, and.